Pick up your phone right now and check how many people you follow, how many followers you have, how many messages you've sent today. You are more connected to more people than any human being in the history of our species. And yet, loneliness is now classified by researchers as a global epidemic, affecting roughly 1 in 3 adults in the developed world. Somehow, surrounded by more connection than our ancestors could have imagined, millions of people feel completely alone. But here is the thing that nobody tells you about loneliness. It is not a modern problem. It is not a social media problem. It is not even a human problem in the way we usually think about it. It is a 300,000-year-old survival signal built into your brain by evolution, and your ancient ancestors felt it just as sharply as you do. The question is what they did about it, and the answer is stranger and more human than you'd expect. Start with the biology. When researchers at UCLA placed people in brain scanners and showed them images of social exclusion, the brain regions that activated were not the emotional processing centers. They were the same regions that activate when you feel physical pain. Dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, anterior insula, the exact same neural hardware that processes a broken bone or a burn, processes the experience of being left out. This is not a metaphor. Social pain is real pain, processed by the same biological machinery as physical injury. Because for 99% of human history, social exclusion was as dangerous as physical injury. A human alone in the Pleistocene was a human at serious risk of dying. The brain learned to treat isolation as an emergency, and that emergency signal is still running inside every person alive today, including you. But how often were ancient humans actually alone? The answer is almost never, and not by accident. Hunter-gatherer groups, the social structure humans lived in for the vast majority of our existence, typically numbered between 20 and 50 individuals. Everyone knew everyone. Everyone depended on everyone. The group was not a social preference. It was survival infrastructure. And being removed from it, through injury, illness, conflict, or geography, was one of the most dangerous things that could happen to a person. Anthropologists studying contemporary hunter-gatherer societies consistently find that solitary individuals are vanishingly rare. When they occur, it is almost always temporary, and the group typically moves to reintegrate the isolated member as quickly as possible. Isolation was not something ancient humans tolerated in themselves or others. It was treated as a problem to be solved. But what happened when it couldn't be solved immediately? What happened during the long winter nights, the days of failed hunts, the periods of illness when a person was temporarily separated from their group? This is where ancient humans developed something that modern psychology has only recently begun to understand. The brain, faced with social isolation, doesn't simply shut down its social processing, it ramps it up. Neuroscientists studying isolated individuals find that the brain begins to hyperactivate its social circuitry, searching for connection in any available signal. Faces appear in clouds. Voices seem to come from the wind. Inanimate objects begin to feel present and alive. This is not psychosis. This is the brain's emergency social system running at full capacity, reaching for connection wherever it can find it. And ancient humans didn't just experience this process. They built an entire spiritual and cultural world around it. The evidence is in the caves. At Lascaux in France, at Altamira in Spain, at hundreds of sites across the ancient world, people crawled into narrow, oxygen-depleted passages deep underground, alone or in very small groups, and painted. Not at the entrance, not in the comfortable, well-lit areas. Deep inside, in the most isolated and disorienting parts of the cave system, where the darkness was complete and the silence was total. Researchers have found handprints pressed directly onto cave walls, the most personal mark a human can make. I was here. I existed. Someone will see this. These weren't decorations. They were conversations with an imagined future audience, a form of social connection across time, made by people who understood intuitively that leaving a mark was a way of not being entirely alone. And then there was fire. Anthropologists studying the social function of fire across cultures consistently find that campfires serve a purpose that goes far beyond warmth or cooking. Data from modern hunter-gatherer groups shows that daytime conversation is almost entirely practical. Logistics, hunting, resources. But nighttime conversation around a fire is almost entirely social. Stories, relationships, laughter, dreams. The fire created a social space where the darkness outside and the isolation it implied was held at bay by the circle of light and the circle of voices. For hundreds of thousands of years, the campfire was the technology ancient humans used to fight loneliness. And it worked because it was designed unconsciously around exactly what the brain needs: warmth, light, faces, voices, and the shared experience of existing together in the dark. But here is where the story becomes genuinely unexpected. Some ancient humans didn't just endure isolation, they sought it deliberately. Across virtually every culture studied by anthropologists, there exists a practice of ritualized solitary withdrawal, what researchers call vision quests, walkabouts, or spirit journeys depending on the culture. The individual leaves the group, enters the wilderness alone, and remains there for days or sometimes weeks. In some cultures, this was a rite of passage. In others, it was a shamanic practice, a way of accessing knowledge unavailable in the social world. And modern neuroscience offers a fascinating explanation for why it worked: the hyperactivation of social circuitry that occurs during isolation. The faces in the clouds, the voices in the wind, the overwhelming sense of presence produces genuine altered states of consciousness. These weren't delusions. They were the brain's social system, running so hot under isolation conditions that it began generating experiences of connection with something beyond the immediate world. Ancient humans didn't just tolerate this, they built entire cosmologies around it. They also talked to the dead. Across the archaeological record, from elaborate burial practices to offerings left at grave sites over decades, there's consistent evidence that ancient humans maintained active social relationships with people who were no longer alive. Grief in the ancient world was not the private, time-limited experience modern Western culture tends to treat it as. It was an ongoing social practice. The ancestors remained present in conversations, in rituals, in the objects they left behind. For a brain that processes social isolation as physical pain, the ability to maintain a felt sense of connection with the dead was not superstition. It was a genuine psychological technology for managing the loss of irreplaceable social bonds. And it worked in measurable ways. Studies of grief across cultures consistently show that societies with robust ancestral communication practices, where the dead are spoken to, honored, and consulted, show lower rates of complicated grief and better long-term psychological outcomes than societies where death is treated as a clean break in the social bond. The ancient humans who talked to their dead were not failing to understand mortality. They were using the brain's social machinery in exactly the way it was designed to be used: to maintain connection, to reduce isolation, to keep the emergency signal from firing continuously. So go back to that phone. The followers, the messages, the endless feed of faces and voices. Every single feature of every social platform you use is exploiting the same neural architecture that ancient humans used to survive. The notification that tells you someone liked your post is activating the same reward circuitry that lit up when a group member acknowledged your presence around a fire 50,000 years ago. The anxiety you feel when a message goes unanswered is the same emergency signal your ancestor felt when the group moved camp without them. The loneliness that persists even through a full inbox is the brain's signal that the connection it's receiving isn't the right kind, the embodied, face-to-face, shared darkness kind that it evolved to need. Your loneliness is not a weakness. It is the oldest and most sophisticated survival system your species ever built. And the next time it fires, remember that every human who ever lived felt exactly the same signal. Sat with it beside a fire, pressed their hand into a cave wall to prove they existed, and kept going anyway. If this changed how you think about your own loneliness, let me know in the comments and subscribe for more stories like this, because the history of what makes us human is far older and far stranger than anything we were taught in school.